Hi guys, I am here today to walk you through how to write a DBQ. And I have sent y'all a DBQ. I've actually put some up at the school if you wanted to get a hard copy of it. I can show you all of my notes, annotations for writing a DBQ. So DBQs can be really complex at first and intimidating at first. But I'm going to try and show you step by step how to put a DBQ together in an argument, a historical argument paper for the AP exam. Okay, so the DBQ I've assigned for you is, I just call it Otto von Bismarck's DBQ. This is the prompt. Evaluate whether the policies of Otto von Bismarck's government represented traditional conservatism or a new kind of conservatism in 19th century Europe. With this prompt, there are a few things you need to take note. First of all, like, what is it asking? It's asking you to evaluate whether or not Bismarck's government was a traditional conservative government or a new kind of conservative government. And if that right now doesn't make any sense to you, it's okay. Hopefully it'll make more sense as you go through the documents, but I'll try and walk you through that. But with respect to the term traditional conservatism, traditional is more like the way it's always been done. If we're talking about European history, traditional usually involves the church or a religious component of some kind in AP Euro. And then a new kind of conservatism is going to be what you're going to see a lot of in the docs, actually. You'll see lots of kind of new ideas that Bismarck has for mixing different political ideologies together with this kind of traditional conservatism. So that's what the documents are going to show you when you go through the documents. So I did write kind of an outline for you here. So I did write out like a little PowerPoint. I'll give this to y'all also to kind of help you visualize the steps, because I'm a very visual person. But the very first thing, again, is read the prompt. So here's the prompt. I provided it for you. Evaluate whether the policies of Otto von Bismarck's government represents traditional conservatism. So again, especially it's tied in with religion, traditional things in AP Euro, or a new kind of conservatism in 19th century Europe. It's also really important that you maybe write out 1800s. The AP exam loves to use like 19th century instead of 1800s. So you just need to make sure you're keeping your dates in line, because when you're under a lot of pressure, you might think that it's the 1900s, and it's not, it's 1800s. Okay, so after we read the prompt, and we're gonna kind of underline like crazy traditional conservatism. So let me highlight that for you. Maybe, and I'm gonna kind of play on the PowerPoint for you, because again, I'm a visual person and I can't write on a dry erase board right now. So after we read the prompt and we've identified kind of what the AP exam wants us to do, we're going to go through the documents and connect the documents to the prompt. So that's our next step. So we have 5 documents. As we go through the documents, we need to look at the source, what's significant about the source, because a few of them will stand out and that will help us later source our documents. What is the main idea of each document, and how do we connect the document to the prompt? So this cannot be more important. You have to connect every single document to the prompt topic. In this case, our topic is traditional conservatism and new conservatism. So how does the document give us facts and tell us what's going on about traditional conservatism or new conservatism in Bismarck's government? That's what we're looking for in every single document, because that's what the AP question prompt is asking. So let's look at document 1 together. Document 1 is legislation passed by Bismarck's government, 1869 to 1878. So if you need a moment, you can pause this and read the document. So if we look at document one is, let me try and make this bigger for you. Is legislation passed by Bismarck's government 1869 to 1878. So a couple of things. On the AP test this year for 2020, your documents might be a little bit shorter. Like this is very, very long. They've kind of promised us that we'll have shorter documents. But the next thing is you don't have to paraphrase the entire document or summarize the entire document for each document. You're kind of looking at key things that jump out to you. So I'm going to go through this just really, really quickly with just the most obvious understandings that I can point out to you. So the first one is about law concerning the equality of all religions with respect to civil rights and citizenship of July 3rd, 1869. So in this it says, all restrictions on citizenship or civil rights based on differences in religious confession are abolished. The right to hold public office shall be independent of religious confession. So this, I'm paraphrasing now, it's essentially freedom of religion, right? That's kind of against traditional conservatism, because traditional conservatism is going to want the integration of church and state, but this law actually kind of separates it and says that there's religious freedom, there's no restrictions on citizenship based on religion in Bismarck's law. Okay, so I'm going to make a note like to the side here or wherever if I have that outline paper that I gave y'all, and I'm going to say like freedom of religion, and then I'm going to say new conservatism. Like I'm going to make a note about new conservatism because that's what is standing out to me the most about this document. Okay, the next one says School Inspection Law of March 11th, 1872. The supervision of all public and private school and educational institutions is solely under the control of the state and not of any clergy. So here, Bismarck is taking power away from any of the churches, any of the clergy in his governmental laws. So he's reducing the power of the church. And this again is going to go in line with a new type of conservatism. And then the other thing I wanted to point out also was, again, we're kind of, this one too is also limiting religion in Germany, or the power of religious entities in Germany. And then this law here is talking about any political group, and it specifically calls out socialists, communists, social democratic, socialists, communists. If any political group causes a disturbance in power or the peace of society, they shall be prohibited. So it's actually putting limits and bans on other political parties assuming more power. Which is actually a traditional conservatism stance. So in this document, we can see that some of the laws that he has are supportive of a new type of conservatism in his government, but also limiting the power of other political parties or other political thoughts, or kind of even political oppression. That is very indicative of traditional conservatism. So on my paper, that's what I'm going to make note of. I'm going to say, okay, well, while these are indicative of a new conservatism, this one actually kind of goes in line with traditional conservatism, because he's like banning the operation of other political parties or the political dissent, if you will. So that's kind of what I'm going to do when I look at document one. I'm going to write document one, like the first three laws are indicative of new conservatism in Bismarck's government, including the idea of freedom of religion for separation of church and limitation of church. So I'm going to make a note of that. So I said that the first three laws are indicative of new conservatism in Bismarck's government, including the idea of freedom of religion or separation of church and limitation of church power, but it also prohibits certain political parties, which is more of a traditional conservatism viewpoint. So according to document 1, so far, all I have is that Bismarck's laws are both elements of a traditional kind of conservatism where we're limiting political party power, and it's also indicative of a new conservatism with the separation of church and state and limiting the church's power and freedom of religion among the people. So document 1 actually has like 2 different things going on with respect to the prompt. And you need to make note of that in your essay. So now let's go on to document 2. Document 2 is by a liberal journalist and politician. Okay, so document 2. Let's read document 2 together, and I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. First of all, in the source, I can see like he's a liberal journalist, right? That stands out to me big time. Yeah. The next thing is I'm gonna he's really happy that Bismarck is gone. Okay, so this liberal journalist did not like Bismarck, and I can tell by the tone and the excitement that he is gone. So you can kind of take with a grain of salt anything he says. You can guess maybe that he's not going to say very flattering things about Otto von Bismarck because the very first thing is, thank God he's gone. Okay. So then it says, a continuation of the domestic policy pursued up to now would actually have brought Germany to ruin. And then where it starts to excite me is here when he says it, that Otto von Bismarck boosted socialism artificially by offering the carrot one moment and then applying the stick the next. So he's saying he's kind of deceived people by offering these socialist measures, but he's still identified as conservative and officially went against the Socialist Party. So he's criticizing Bismarck in this, and I'm kind of paraphrasing this for you, but please take a moment to pause it and read through it. And that's what I need y'all to do for each document that we do. So I'm going to go take my notes for my outline and kind of write that in. So for document 2, I'm going to say that it's a critique. This dude, Eugen, is kind of calling out Bismarck, saying that he identifies as a conservative and he tries to do some socialist things to help us, but he's really not socialist at heart. It's more of a deception on both ends. He's not a real conservative and he's not a real socialist, but he's trying to come across as helping the socialists. So it's kind of a sarcastic critique of Otto von Bismarck, this document. Okay, so let's move on to document 3. Document 3 is this political cartoon. So political cartoons are my favorite. You need to be really careful when you analyze them though, and make sure you're looking at them really carefully. So document 2, let me go back with this document 1 and kind of highlight some of the big things that stood out to me. This one here, solely under the control of the state. And this one, limiting religious power and prohibiting active political parties. Okay. So those were the things in document 1 that stood out to me. Document 2, these are the things that stood out to me. Document 3. So document 3, we have this political cartoon. Something that really stands out to me is this in the source. It's a satirical German magazine, and we all know what satire is, hopefully, right? Satire is kind of an exaggeration of the truth to make fun of something or kind of shed a different humorous light on something that wasn't supposed to be funny. So it's a satirical German magazine, and here we have this Otto von Bismarck, and he is guiding a ship. And then we see these labels here. So conservative, liberal, and then it says ultramontane. Ultramontane, you don't need to know what that is, but just it's an ultra conservative religious party that emphasizes the power of the Pope. So just think like very religious this is. And then we have conservative and we have liberal. So here he is driving this ship, and the caption is, the liberal says to the other two, don't worry, when the wind shifts, I'll be on top again. So this is kind of, again, we're making fun of Bismarck because it's a satirical magazine, but it kind of tells us how Bismarck favored aspects of different parties as part of his new conservatism. Like that's what it's telling us. So he takes pieces of different political parties and he puts them into his own ideology and what he defines this new conservatism as. So I'm going to go to my PowerPoint, which would be on for you, just on your paper. And I'm going to write about what this means to the prompt topic. Remember, the prompt topic is about new conservatism versus traditional conservatism. So I'm going to say, to interpret this political cartoon, Bismarck, okay, he is trying to appease everyone while limiting the pool of other political parties. Okay, so this is my interpretation of the political cartoon of him steering a boat, and his definition of new conservatism, which includes elements of these other political parties. So you have to kind of put yourself in his shoes. He is trying really hard to stay in power and to limit the power of the other political parties. And in order to do that, he needs to appeal to their supporters and their voters. So he's doing things to appeal to those supporters so that those political parties don't overthrow him or gain power in parliament at the time. Okay, so now let's go to document 4. So document 4 is Kaiser Wilhelm's speech. So let's look at that. So in document 4, we have Kaiser Wilhelm I's speech opening the Reichstag. The Reichstag is the parliament in Berlin in 1881. So in this speech, some of the key things is just, again, I recommend that you pause and read through and see if you can identify some key things before I identify them for you. Also, okay, promotion of workers' welfare was something that stuck out to me because this is a kind of socialist, favorable policy. And then understanding the Reichstag as parliament is also just a good thing to know, despite party differences. So like workers should have good welfare despite whatever political party they are affiliated with. Also, ensuring workers, again, protection of workers against industrial accidents is something that stood out to me. A health insurance system for workers goes along with workers' rights. And then a greater degree of state welfare, so state assistance programs, than they have seen in the past. is something that Bismarck is appealing to. So here in a new conservatism type government, we're seeing the appeal to the workers or the laborers. And the purpose of that is to reduce the power of the socialist political party. So to reduce the power of a different political party, you want to appeal to their supporters, and that's what's happening here. It's Bismarck's government trying to appeal to workers in order to limit the power of the socialist political party. So I'm going to write that in my notes. We go to document 4, workers as a part of the new conservatism. Remember, I always want to talk about the new conservatism or traditional conservatism because that's what the prompt says. I have to connect my document to the prompt. I can't just summarize my document. I have to explain what that means about Bismarck's type of conservatism in his government. So he's giving workers protections like accident protection or health insurance. And he wants to do this to reduce the power of the socialist political party. Okay, so this is just my quick recap of document 4 and how it's connected to the prompt. So now let's go on to document 5. Oops. So document 5. Document 5 again, we have in support of a new accident insurance bill. So these two documents are really similar. You can see industrial accidents, new accident insurance bill. I want to kind of keep that in mind because they would be really easy to group together in a body paragraph. So a couple of other things that stood out is that we need to serve the people. So like the masses, if you will, not try and dominate the people. So dominating the people is what traditional conservatism was about, but now with this new conservatism, the goal is to serve the people instead. So that's like part of an element of his new conservatism. Let me see what else here that stands out. The state's responsible for national defense and responsible for transportation. That's just something that kind of stood out, but it's not terribly significant. This is, though, we must help persons in distress and prevent workers' complaints that can be exploited by the social democrats. So again, we see here he's trying to limit the political power of the socialist democrats by appealing to the workers, by trying to get the worker support, by giving them more rights or benefits. So each law for poor relief is socialism. There are states that distance themselves so far from socialism that poor laws do not exist at all. So what he's saying in this last paragraph right here is that kind of socialism has a bad rap, and he's not afraid to take some socialist measures to help the people. And kind of his underlying reason for doing that is that he wants to take power away from the socialist democratic parties, political parties. So that's what he's saying down here. So go to my outline. I'm going to take notes over what I just wrote. So document 5. What does it say? It says that, and it's kind of a breakaway from this traditional conservatism where, again, he says that the government used to dominate the people. Now the government is meant to serve people instead of dominate dominate would be traditional conservatism. So he's like breaking away from that and moving to a new kind of conservatism in his eyes, which is to serve the people. So that's document 5. So I've now like gone through all the documents and I've kind of outlined the highlights of the documents and how it connects to the prompt. And after you do that, which hopefully you do it on the outline paper that I provide you with, or scratch paper even, or even better, if you can do it directly on the documents, it's super helpful. The next thing we're gonna do is group the documents. So you want to group, you can group really in different ways, but if you find similarities in how the documents address the prompt, that's usually the best way to group your documents. So you can group the documents in 2 ways. With only 5 documents on this exam or on this DBQ, you can group by 2 documents in 1 paragraph and 3 documents in another, 2 documents in 1 paragraph, then 2 documents in another paragraph, and then 1 document. So you can have like a loner document that you either have a separate paragraph for, or you can put that document in the conclusion. And you can group them according to contradiction. Like if you see 2 documents that directly contradict each other, you can group according to that. You can group according to similar topics or corroboration. Or if there's kind of like an odd man out document or a qualification, like all the documents support this except for this, you can also group according to that like qualification. Like, well, these 2 say this, but this one also says this instead. So it's another way you can kind of group them together. Okay, so you need to kind of outline your group. So in my sample essay that I'm going to write, I'm probably going to have group 1 be doc 1 and 2, and it just worked out this way. It's usually not this clean. And group 2 equals documents 3, 4, and 5. So let me explain why I grouped documents 1 and 2 like this. So I grouped documents 1 and 2 like this because documents 1 and 2, like the similarity they have is that Bismarck is kind of promoting like a new type of conservatism, but also trying to hang on to his more traditional value conservatism. Both of the documents kind of point that out. So I'm grouping this together because it's kind of half some traditional conservatism is present and some new conservatism is present. So that's why I group those together. In groups 3, 4, and 5, I group those together. Really 4 and 5 go the best together because we have kind of social workers' rights highlighted by Bismarck and his new conservatism. And then the way that document 3, the political cartoon, fits in is it shows that shows he is not a true traditional conservatism because he favors aspects of other political ideologies in his government, which a true conservative would not do. So that's why I would group these together. So this is kind of going to set the stage for my first body paragraph and my second body paragraph. I'm going to try and make a topic sentence for those paragraphs really close to these categories. Okay, so after I've grouped the docs, hang in there with me, guys. I'm going to write contextualization and my thesis statement. So contextualization should set the stage for your paper. It should take place about 50 to 100 years before the events. So I know it's Germany, and I know maybe you immediately think of like Martin Luther, but Martin Luther was the 1500s, and this is like 1800s. So talking about Martin Luther in your contextualization is not a good idea. It's too far back. You need to try and find something that's more recent in the 50 to 100 year range before. And you need to be able to connect your setting the stage directly to Bismarck's traditional conservatism or new conservatism. And then you're going to write then you're going to write a thesis statement. Your thesis statement should be 1, 2, 3 long sentences, packed with evidence supporting an argument and addressing the prompt. Please be super detailed in your thesis statement. Having it 2 sentences long with the first sentence beginning with while and although. It's always also awesome to add a second sentence that says additionally this, and this, and this, blah, 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 new conservatism as well. You want to try and pack as much evidence as possible in your thesis statement. So I'm going to go to this slide here, and with you, we're going to write a thesis statement together based on looking through the documents that we just looked through and categorizing them by groupings. So our prompt is, again, I always have to reread the prompt 1,000 times to make sure that I am not veering off course. Evaluate whether the policies of Otto von Bismarck's government represented traditional conservatism or a new kind of conservatism in 19th century Europe. Okay, so what I do know is that there were a few documents, especially documents 1 and 2, that kind of suggested he had some traditional conservative tendencies. So I'm going to say, although okay, so this is kind of messy right now. That's okay, that's part of the process. When you write your first introduction thesis, it's going to be kind of messy. That's okay. And something I want you to remember is it's better to be too detailed than not detailed enough. It's better to be too wordy and it to sound too wordy, which mine really does, than to not have enough words and be really, really vague. So in my thesis, I emphasized how Bismarck kind of had some traditional conservatism, but most of the elements in his new government ideology was new conservatism. So, and I specifically pointed out those elements. I talked about workers' welfare. I talked about limiting the church, promoting freedom of religion. And then I talked about him being kind of called a fake by a liberal. Which kind of shows he did implement some socialist policy, even though he identifies as a conservative. So it kind of goes against his traditional conservative ways. So my thesis is really confusing right now, but I'm going to clean it up later. I want your thesis to be messy in the introduction and super detailed in the introduction. And then as you write your paper, it will start to come together. My thesis at the end of my paper, I'll rewrite it after I sign off in a moment, because this video is getting kind of long, sorry. I'll rewrite it for you in a cleaner way. So the next thing I want to talk about, though, very quickly is you need to source your documents. So part of your body paragraphs need to include what's called sourcing. So this is where we have HAP or HIP, historical situation, audience, purpose, point of view. I will give you a couple of examples of these. After I push out this video, I'll write a few examples of these for you. And you also need to provide outside evidence. So you need like 2 pieces of outside evidence in your body paragraphs. This outside evidence needs to be able to connect and be relevant to Bismarck's new or traditional conservatism and influence it in some way. And then this is what your DBQ will look like. So the first paragraph is your introduction. Sorry, that's horrible. I have been working too long on this. Your first paragraph. First paragraph is your contextualization and thesis statement. So background information setting the stage 50 to 100 years before, and your thesis statement, which I did for you. Your second paragraph is your first document grouping. So in this case, for me, it was documents 1 and 2. And then you want to include 1 HAP, so one of these things of sourcing your documents. And you want to include 1 outside evidence fact, and I'll give you some examples of those in a moment. Well, when I'm done with this video, I'll email y'all. Third paragraph is your second grouping, 2 to 3 docs, plus again 1 HAP and 1 piece of outside evidence that's not found in the documents. And then fourth paragraph, you need to restate your thesis. It's going to be cleaner. I'm going to make it more beautiful than my first thesis was, and put anything you have forgotten. So if you forgot a HAP, or if you forgot outside evidence, or if you forgot your contextualization in the introduction, that all goes in your fourth paragraph. Okay. So I know that was a lot. Please feel free to like pause as much as possible to go through the steps of it. I'm going to put out just like a sample outline for you for this DBQ so that you have a better guide to practice this DBQ and evaluating the documents and making a historical argument. Okay, please feel free to email me also if you have any questions. Thank y'all.